Hello and welcome to EM360 Live, a monthly live Q&A where we pick the brains of some of the most influential people shaking up the enterprise tech space today. My name is Matt Harris, head of content here at EM360, and today I'm joined by Barry Flack. Barry is an expert in HR and talent and has helped countless businesses adapt to the ever-changing world of work. Today, I'm going to be asking Barry about modern workplace culture and empowering employees to be more productive. Barry, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. Great to be here.
Yeah, man. Just for the audience who don't already know you, could you just give a little background onto who you are and what you do?
Yeah, of course you can. Look, my name is Barry Flack. Look, I'm a fractional HR executive, which is an emerging type of job in the UK, which put simply allows me to work with lots of clients on a part-time basis, given my expertise and my time in a role that they otherwise couldn't and wouldn't afford.
Nice one. Cheers for that. So obviously, yeah, we've seen a lot about workplace culture recently, and apart from maybe the rise of AI, I've never seen anything have so many different, buzzwords and trends kind of surrounding it. We've seen, remote work, we've seen 4-day weeks, quiet quitting, we've seen Wagamama workspaces. The first question I kind of wanted to ask you is, why are employees so vocal right now about how they want to work? And has this always been the case and we just haven't realized, or is this, a specifically big issue right now?
Yeah, look, it's been around for a while. This has been in the post. Work, I would sort of chart from about the end of the last century for the last few decades, has been fundamentally reinventing itself. So the old way that our parents and our grandparents worked, the old beliefs that they put together that held them together in the workplace disappeared. The social contract ended. And look, we've been, prior to the pandemic, trying to reinvent ourselves, trying to understand what some of these things mean. I think the pandemic was absolutely seminal. It gave us as employees the chance, frankly, to spend too much time reflecting on the meaning of life. And I think since then, we've had to put up with just an economic, disaster in many respects across the globe, where we're trying to come up with new answers to sort of old problems. The biggest issue that we have at the moment is, it's disparate. There isn't one big prevailing narrative. We know in the tech industry, we've ceased growth, but we know that there are boom areas in terms of skill sets. You could replicate automation and the advancement of that. So I think we will continue to have a noisy background as we work our way through understanding what the next new way of dealing with work looks and feels like.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Do you kind of feel like we're in a good place right now in terms of, employer-employee relations? Do you feel like people are happy coming to work in general? How do you kind of see the space right now?
Look, we've always had frankly, Gallup polls, engagement polls when they were trendy, tended to put us at the very low end in relation to engagement. So, look, I think work is an unnatural state for human beings. Yeah, we have to remember that. It's a pretty new phenomena. We're hunter-gatherers, and we ultimately want to hang around under trees after catching a couple of animals. So it's unnatural. We're trying to come to terms with, where does this fit in? It's essential. Whilst we will have pride in our work, we don't need to fall in love with our work and all the toxic ramifications that go with that. So I think as individuals, once again, seminal time, how do we get ourselves around integrating work with its associated technology that's made it 24/7 and everything else that frankly is about us understanding how we can remain happy, productive, fulfilling, and where does work fit into all of that? So, we're working our way through this, Matt, and I think we'll continue to do that. We're in a neverland between the old social construct that's dead, doesn't work, command and control, everything that existed, and a world that we just are simply experimenting with, going through, and haven't landed. So it feels, for people like me, brilliant, because I can help be there in creating. But it's a tough time to really understand what predictable work feels like.
Yeah, especially because we're breaking new ground all of the time. I know personally, like a couple of people where their workplace are currently trialing 4-day weeks. And I saw a blog post that you kind of posted recently where you had some pretty interesting words for that new phenomenon. I wanted to kind of pick your brain on this episode and really get to know, first of all, what you kind of feel about 4-day weeks, and why do you think that they're not necessarily solving the issues that they purport to solve?
Yeah, look, I was harsh. My ultimate takeaway was, are we really suggesting the best we can do is replacing the old fashioned 5 day a week, 40-hour week with a 4 day equivalent? Yeah, they're both time honored, they're both time based. They're still not tackling what I think is the inherent issue at the heart of all of this, which is we're grappling with productivity. We had an old ownership model that just had the employer looking after you for 40 hours. And we've recognized that, frankly, as humans, we dove and we tail and we bob and weave and work differently during that time. We fill our days full of nonsense at times and we're unproductive. And we're gravitating now, because technology allows us to do it. We can chunk up work. We can create task base. So we've got this sort of outcome base that says, well, look, actually, that's the model that we're gravitating towards. What you do is what I'll pay. But I think we're also grappling with the humanity aspect of it, yeah, because humans are messy. When they come together, there's a pleasure and pain of working with people. There is the unproductive building of relationships, the messy side of relationships, all of that stuff that we don't want to lose for what could sound like a very transactional, Barry, you've got a piece of work, it lasts 8 hours and I will pay you for those 8 hours. So we want a bit of both. We want to break free from the old, but 4-day weeks is a staging post, Matt. It's just a breakout from knowing that the old one's broken, but I would suspect we'll move beyond the 4-day week. I mean, who's going to be the first advocate of a 3-day week, as another way of looking at it? So look, it's good learning, and it tips and pinpoints lots of good things in the workplace, but it's not where we should be heading as a final answer.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I want to kind of ask you some questions from the audience in just a second, but my kind of final thought on that is, a lot of these kind of trends and issues are arising from people ultimately feeling, unproductive, ultimately feeling unfulfilled at work. I'm curious then, if things like the 4-day week aren't necessarily the answer, do you have any kind of common quick fixes at top of mind that can help the average employee feel more empowered when they come to work?
Yeah, look, I do make a point of saying about the complexity of humans, but actually there's some very simple, pieces that you put in there. I mean, and the first thing I would always challenge founders, CEOs, is their belief system. If you are going into a workplace and you have a positive sense of the person who works for you, who wants to come to work and do a good job, reorientating your belief system around that will give that person enormous levels of empowerment. You change the narrative from one that we've had for far too long, which is, I distrust you, you're here to do me harm, you're not good enough, and I am corroding absolutely everything about your own self-worth. When in fact, if I go in knowing that you're there for good reasons, I can empower you with letting you know what's going on in the business. I can give you the tools to do the job. I can look at our interaction with very positive intent. So how can I make you better, Matt? How can I have narratives that are not about scolding you, that are not about demeaning you, that are not about keeping you in a very siloed box? Yeah, we're continuing to know and learn and understand what people and what make them tick, making the things that they want to do or they get goodness from is what I would encourage every leader, everybody in the business to do as a real fix. You will get a return on that. You will stop unproductive rituals that we've had around for too long, like performance management, which is very much about marking homework, which is very much about catching people out. So a huge part of this is building on intent, and we can build lots of other more sophisticated ways of working around that, but trust your people.
Yeah, makes sense. Very, very well said. Well, we've obviously got a few questions coming through from the YouTube. And the first one is from Fraser Floyd. And Fraser asks, workers are demanding a lot right now. Are you expecting to see any employer favored trends emerging soon, as opposed to just the employee favored trends?
Yeah, look, I think the challenge for any employer on this is, look, we go through waves. We're in an employer-friendly arena at this moment in time, but we're in a very sort of socially aware stage that says, be careful what you do at this time because you'll be judged upon it. We do know that, times are tough, but there is a raft of ways of working with your people, short of cost cutting and some of the other stuff that have gone with sort of, the tech bubble bursting, that you should be careful about exploiting in relation to, the environment as it stands at the moment. But look, I think for employers over the next few years, their challenge will be, how do I organize in a world where this guy, Barry's told me the predictable, 9 to 5 full-time employee is disappearing. How do I build liquidity into my workforce? I'm a prime example of one of these atypical workforces that have appeared that didn't exist a few years ago. So increasingly automating technology and how do I get the very best out of people as an employer, given that skill sets are becoming redundant, demographics are proving that the numbers aren't there, et cetera, et cetera. So much more complexity. Be open to doing things you've never done before. A good question, Fraser.
Got it. Yeah, cheers, Fraser. And my next question, kind of off the back of that, is from Ripon from our LinkedIn audience, and he says, "Hi, Matt, Barry. If you could change one thing about traditional 9 to 5 culture, what would it be and why?"
Look, I think it's the presenteeism that tends to be reflected in that. So, one of the things that as we continue to understand, we are integrating work and life. Yeah, if I go back to my previous answer, because somebody has a life that they need to integrate with work and need to be at places and do things, don't make them feel guilty. Recognize that there's a bit of flex in the deliverables that need to take place. So 9 to 5, 40-hour week always strikes me as I own you during that period. And actually, I'm going to make you feel nervous about not turning up in every true sense of it. We know there's a correlation between those who provide their employees with autonomy, with freedom, with the flex to do their job, so that we are, judging them on outcomes, not on their ability to be in front of you, justifying their existence.
I find it interesting how you talk about 9 to 5 culture. Do you feel like it's inevitable that we're not going to see much of this anymore going forward, or do you kind of see it as more of an inevitability that it's kind of going to be around forever in one sense or another?
I'm going to sound terribly political and say it's probably somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that at the moment, unhealthily in the noise, question that you put to me, Matt, there are polarized debates between office real estate and a very protective industry that was at the center and is at the center of so much of our fabric. Yeah. So we've got that to resolve. We've got a very noisy remote working culture stroke organization that will dial up your ability to live your life more than the sort of work element of it. But I think as we increasingly get to know what makes us tick, and neuroscience in the workplace is pretty new. It used to be about traumas. It's now about what makes us happy and what doesn't, and what we fear. I think we're now getting to a point of realizing that there's certain things we like and need, which is people and company and the quality of interaction when it comes to being innovative. And there are times when quite simply we need to get work done, or we need to feel okay that we're in control of the private side of our life. So I think we're going to end up melding both. But we really need to understand how we put an organizational ecosystem around that. How do you reward that? How do you measure that? How much latitude do you give to the times when it's downtime and people are enjoying it? Does that work? Does that not work? What is the state, look upon on this? How do we categorize employees? So we have a lot of complexity baked into what is a world of work and a world that's changing fundamentally in front of us.
Yeah, got it. Makes sense. And we also have Jack on the YouTube audience. And he says post-COVID hybrid work seems to be a regular occurrence for the majority. How do you feel like remote and hybrid working will look like in the next 10 years? We're obviously seen memos from Google, Meta, Twitter, all kind of, really prioritizing that move back to the office. And we've seen, a lot of startups do quite the opposite. How do you kind of see this developing by the end of the decade?
Yeah, look, I think I think a lot of these big companies are conflating downturn, lack of productivity, and an old belief system that says if you're not here, you're watching daytime TV, and I can't trust you. I think at its worst, it's not a great signal to send to people. Yeah, I think we need to be more sophisticated about that. As per my previous answer, we do need the office to be nowhere and everywhere. We need to come into different spaces to do different things. But I think over the next few years, I think the challenge is going to be what's the organization, what's the outside in, who do we interact with? Technology will allow us to do that anywhere. Technology will allow us to bring people into that mix. I think the complexity of a liquid type workforce is increasing, where full-time still accounts for about 60% of the workforce. But it's not growing, it's going down. It's not going down at a massively disproportionate scale. But I think tapping into expertise, how people come in and come out of teams, how they fold and then fold away. I think where do they assemble, who owns that? There's an awful lot of big new questions for people in the market like us who wander it, do good work, but are not tied to one particular employer. And so where do we turn up and how do we interact? The other thing that is a real risk, I think, around this, of course, is the spread of, just internet connectivity. Means if you're chunking up the work, how do you create some standards between people in a cost of living environment in the South Sahara than you do in somebody in Northern Europe? If you're pricing jobs up, a real global marketplace that could cause an issue, So, the loneliness of the transactional person, the waking up, hologram, doing a job all day in one box room virtually and then going to sleep again, never having to, partake with people. So, look, I think, Jack, in short, it's lets us shape something that's purposeful, that it's work related, but we don't lose sight of our own humanity, or we'll have some terrible dystopian future of a whole series of epidemic problems, when actually, we've got to remember we just want to enjoy our time here, and work's a very important part of all of that.
Yeah, well said. We also have another question from Ripon, and Ripon's asking, is remote working seen by organizations and their hierarchy as a compromise? And if so, how much negotiation power do employees really have to retain their right to work away from the office?
Yeah, look, I think it's a philosophical battle going on, Ripon. I think there is, the business case, as I say, is becoming blurred. And it's really difficult in the boardroom to be able to say, are these people contributing to my profit and productivity, or is it a cause of my downturn? And it's very seductive to say the latter. And I think we need to be recognizing this as a nuanced debate. People are not tied, as I said earlier. The loyalty of the old social contracts disappeared. People will leave and go to employers who offer them more about what they want. So it may feel like an illusion at the moment because the market's not great in many places. So people are hanging in there for all the obvious survival reasons. But that'll break free. We'll come out of that. And I think we're still tied to that great resignation post-pandemic perspective that says, if he or she is making me go in and I've enjoyed the ability to see my kids, to care for the family, to do other things, and log on at a different time, then I'm going to the employer that very explicitly tells me that's part of the proposition. And I think we're gravitating to a very clear, that's an important thing to have, we need to contract with those good people to say, what's the proposition for being in the office? What's the proposition for not being remote? And, you know, will it feel authentic to you as you travel in on an expensive train in an office and find everybody on the phone, you know, not talking to you, you know? So we've got to be authentic. People will ultimately walk if we're not giving that to them. But at the moment, feels like the employer has lots of cards saying, you know, tough market, do you really want to be out there?
I'm struggling to get a read on you, Barry. Are you quite optimistic that employers and employees will kind of reach a bit more of like a common understanding across the board moving forward? Or do you kind of feel like all of the discourse right now is kind of opening up a can of worms in terms of what employees feel like they deserve and what employers feel like they can give? You know, are you feeling good about things?
Yeah, look, I'm feeling good because I'm selfishly embroiled in it all, and it makes my head hurt trying to solve it. So I appreciate we've got an audience that wants somebody to come up with an answer. Look, I think if history is anything to tell us, the last big, you know, sort of rules of engagement at work, that, you know, 40-hour week, that 9 to 5, you know, came about as a whole series of compromises. Yeah, it all came about due to the talent of individuals to say, you know, we need 2 days rest. Yeah, you know, that 40 made sense for a reason. And it did make a sense for a reason, because it was 8 hours sleeping, 8 hours working, and 8 hours rest was the initial compromise on it. So, you know, we will come up with new consequences. We will then, I think, as a human race, come up with clever, you know, responses to that. I think if we're intentional, we clearly see the dangers, you know, that the excesses of being too remote and too isolated and too unfriending in the world has on us as humans. But I think equally, we've recognized that we're not going to come in because the employer says you must be sitting in front of me because I don't trust you, you know, is not going to win anymore. So we're carving our way through. I think positively we'll get there. But a lot of what we're seeing at the moment is sort of staging posts. And look, that old system, you know, has been incredibly enduring. It should have died in the late 80s, you know, but it hasn't, and it hangs around, and it's still got a bit of life in it, but it's becoming each year utterly unsustainable in holding the workplace together. So yeah, look, Matt, I am positive. I think we'll work our way through it, but it will feel a bit odd and it'll feel a bit bumpy along the way as we come up with the new answers.
Very well said there. Well, obviously, we are coming up to the end of the show. But my last question for you is one that I ask every guest that comes on to EM360 Live. And that is, if you could swap jobs with anyone for a day, who would it be and why?
Look, if I could swap, it would be, I think, like my teenage obsession with playing football. I still haven't given up hope that somebody's going to come along and select me. I'd be out there coaching some of the best players on a football pitch, smelling the grass, kicking a football, this thing I would do 24/7 as my guilty and not so guilty pleasure. And I'd be swapping it with a coach that I could see others grow in terms of what they could do if I had the ability to do that in them. But that still retains my hope long into my old age that maybe somebody will give me that.
So we can expect to see you at Man City soon or something.
The chances are absolutely zero, but a man needs to dream, and I will continue to do that.
Nice one, Barry. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people go to find more about you?
Yeah, look, I'm pretty hot in terms of LinkedIn in relation to some of the stuff I talk about, fractional ways of working, and look, equally, you will get me via my website, which is very easily barryflack.co.uk.
Thanks so much, Barry. Well, thanks to the audience for joining and all of your questions. We'll be back next month with another live stream, but until then, follow the conversation on our socials at EM360 Tech on Twitter and LinkedIn. And for more great daily content, please head on over to em360tech.com. Cheers, Barry.
Thank you, Matt.